The transport ship docked at Vortex Station with a soft hiss of pressure seals. Marcus Cole stood near the airlock, a single bag over his shoulder. He was not a tall man. He was not particularly muscular. His brown hair was cut short, and his face carried the kind of lines that came from years of hard living. He looked ordinary, forgettable, even. The airlock opened, and Marcus stepped onto the station for the first time. Vortex Military Academy was the most prestigious training facility in the Galactic Coalition. Species from 40 different worlds sent their best young warriors here. Graduation meant a guaranteed officer position in the Coalition fleet. It meant honor, respect, and a future. For humanity, it meant something more. Humans had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago. They were still considered newcomers, children playing at the adults' table. Sending a human to Vortex was a statement. It said that humanity wanted to be taken seriously. Marcus was that statement. A protocol officer met him at the docking bay. She was a Deleth, an amphibian species with smooth blue skin and large dark eyes. She introduced herself as Administrator Yell and handed him a data tablet with his assignment. Barrack 17. 7th floor. Bunk 14. Marcus thanked her and made his way through the station. The corridors were wide and tall, designed to accommodate species of all sizes. He passed a group of Crethful warriors, each one standing over 7 feet tall, with thick scales covering their bodies. They looked at him with something between curiosity and contempt. He kept walking. He passed Sathani cadets with their razor-sharp claws and predator eyes. He passed the Rixians with their pale skin and superior expressions. He passed dozens of species he could not name, all of them watching the small human walk through their territory. Marcus did not react. He simply walked. Barrack 17 was a large circular room with bunks arranged around the walls. When Marcus entered, 12 pairs of eyes turned toward him. The conversation stopped. The room became very quiet. Marcus found bunk 14. It was in the corner, near the waste recycling unit, the worst spot in the room. He did not complain. He set down his bag and began to unpack. The largest cadet in the room stood up. He was a Crethful, his scales glowing faint blue in the artificial light. His name was Varax, and his family had produced military officers for 6 generations. He walked toward Marcus with heavy steps that made the floor vibrate slightly. Marcus continued unpacking. Varax stopped behind him. He did not speak at first. He simply stood there, using his size to intimidate. It was an old technique, common among pack predators. Establish dominance early. Make the weak one submit. Marcus pulled a small photograph from his bag and placed it on the shelf above his bunk. It showed a group of humans in military uniforms standing in front of a burned-out building. Their faces were tired but smiling. Varax leaned closer. His breath was hot against the back of Marcus's neck. "Human," Varax said. His voice was deep and rough. "You are in my barracks." Marcus turned around. He had to look up to meet the Crethful's eyes. The size difference was almost comical. Varax could have crushed him with one hand. "I am," Marcus said calmly. "The Academy assigned me here." Varax bared his teeth. Among his species, it was a threat display. "The Academy makes mistakes. Perhaps you should request a transfer. Somewhere safer." Marcus considered this for a moment. Then he shook his head. "I think I will stay." The room held its breath. Nobody spoke to Varax like that. Nobody refused him. The Crethful scales shifted color, darkening with anger. But before Varax could respond, Marcus simply turned back to his bag and continued unpacking. He pulled out a book, a paper one with actual pages, and placed it next to the photograph. Then some clothes. A small toolkit. Nothing special. Varax stood there, unsure what to do. The human had not submitted. But he had not challenged either. He had just continued his task as if Varax was not worth worrying about. It was insulting. It was confusing. And somewhere deep in Varax's predator brain, it was slightly frightening. The Krethfol returned to his bunk without another word. But his eyes never left the human. That night, the other cadets whispered among themselves. They shared what they knew about humans. Weak bones, short lives, no natural weapons, no armor. They had only survived on their homeworld through luck and stubbornness. A Sithani cadet named Crix laughed at this. They are prey animals, he said, soft and slow. This one will not last a month. From across the room, a Deleth cadet named Mira watched the human in his corner bunk. Marcus was reading his paper book, seemingly unaware of the conversation about him. Or perhaps he simply did not care. Myra noticed something the others missed. The human's hands were steady. His breathing was even. His body was relaxed, but not slack. She had seen that kind of stillness before. Her people were prey species too. They had learned long ago to recognize predators. And they had learned that the most dangerous predators were not always the loudest ones. Sometimes the quiet ones were the worst. Marcus finished his chapter and closed his book. He looked around the room once, meeting Myra's eyes for a brief moment. Then he lay down and went to sleep. The others stayed awake much longer, talking and planning. They would show the human his place. They would teach him that Vortex was not for his kind. They would break him. Marcus slept peacefully. In the morning, training would begin. The real tests would come. But for now, the human rested. He had learned long ago to sleep when he could. War had taught him that. War had taught him many things. The other cadets did not know this yet. They saw only a small, ordinary man with no claws and no scales and no obvious strength. They would learn. The first week at Vortex Academy established routines. Wake at station dawn. Physical training until the body screamed. Classroom lectures on tactics and history. Combat simulations in the afternoon. Evening meals in the crowded mess hall. Sleep. Repeat. Marcus followed the routine without complaint. He was never the fastest in physical training, but he was never the slowest either. He sat in the middle of the classroom and took notes. He performed adequately in simulations. Nothing special. Nothing memorable. This seemed to disappoint some of the instructors. They had expected something from the first human cadet. Some display of ability or determination. Instead, they got a quiet man who did exactly what was required and nothing more. Varax and his allies were not disappointed. They were pleased. The humans' mediocrity confirmed what they already believed. Humans were not worthy of Vortex. They began their campaign slowly. At first, it was small things. A shoulder check in the corridor. A foot extended to trip him during morning runs. Equipment that went missing from his locker. Marcus replaced the equipment without reporting it. He stepped over the extended feet. He absorbed the shoulder checks and kept walking. The others grew bolder. During combat simulations, the cadets were divided into teams and given objectives. Capture the point. Defend the position. Eliminate the enemy. Standard military exercises. But whenever Marcus was assigned to a team, he found himself targeted by everyone. Both teams would focus fire on him. Both teams wanted to be the one to eliminate the human. Marcus adapted. He learned to use cover more effectively. He learned which angles were blind spots for different species. He learned to move when others expected him to stay still. He survived more simulations than he lost. This annoyed his tormentors. They wanted him to fail visibly. They wanted him to quit. Instead, he just kept showing up. Every morning. Every exercise. Every meal. In the mess hall, the cadets arranged themselves by species and status. The Krethfol took the center tables. The Therixians claimed the spots near the windows with the best views. The lesser species filled in around the edges. Marcus ate alone at a small table near the waste disposal. Nobody sat with him. Nobody spoke to him during meals except to insult him. 2 weeks into training, a Sithani cadet named Crix approached Marcus during evening meal. Crix was smaller than Varax but faster. His species were ambush predators. Quick kills. Sharp claws that could cut through armor. Krix stood over Marcus's table. "Human, you are in my seat." Marcus looked at the empty tables around them. There were at least 15 available seats. He looked back at Crix. "There are other seats," Marcus said. Crix leaned closer. His claws extended slightly. "I want this one." The mess hall grew quiet. Cadets turned to watch. This was entertainment. This was the natural order asserting itself. Marcus set down his utensil. He looked at Crix for a long moment. Then he picked up his tray, stood, and moved to another table without a word. Crix sat down in the claimed seat with a satisfied hiss. His friends laughed and congratulated him. The human had submitted. The human knew his place, but Mira, the Deleth cadet, watched from across the hall. She saw what the others missed. Marcus had not lowered his eyes when he stood. He had not hunched his shoulders or quickened his steps. His hands had remained steady on his tray. He had moved because fighting over a chair was stupid. Not because he was afraid. Myra began to pay more attention to the human after that. She noticed that he observed everything. His eyes moved constantly, tracking movements, cataloging exits, watching the patterns of station life. She noticed that he ate quickly, but not desperately, the way someone eats when they have learned that meals can be interrupted by violence. She noticed the scars. Humans wore less clothing than most species. Their thermal regulation required it. And Marcus had scars. Not many, but enough. A thin line across his left forearm. A rough patch on his shoulder, visible when he exercised. Small marks that spoke of past injuries. Myra's people were scientists and diplomats. But they had survived for millennia by understanding predators, by knowing when to run and when to hide. And everything she observed about Marcus Cole told her the same thing. This human was not prey. One evening, she found herself walking beside him in the corridor. It was not planned. Their schedules had simply aligned. Marcus glanced at her, but did not speak. Myra was nervous, but curiosity drove her. "May I ask you something?" Marcus nodded. Double quotes. "Why do you not fight back? Against Varax and the others?" Marcus considered the question as they walked. The corridor was empty. Their footsteps echoed softly. "Fighting would prove nothing," he said finally. "They would say I was aggressive, dangerous, unfit for the academy. And if I lost, they would say I was weak. Either way, they win." Myra processed this. "So you let them win now instead?" Marcus smiled slightly. It was the first time she had seen him smile. "I let them think they are winning. There's a difference." They reached a junction in the corridor. Myra's barracks was to the left. Marcus's was to the right. "What are you waiting for?" Myra asked. Marcus looked at her with those steady human eyes. "The right moment," he said. Then he nodded politely and walked away. Myra returned to her quarters with more questions than answers. But she had learned something important. The human had a plan. The third month at Vortex Academy brought the first formal evaluation. Cadets would be tested on everything they had learned. Physical conditioning, tactical knowledge, combat readiness. Those who failed would be sent home in disgrace. Those who passed would continue to harder challenges. There was also the exhibition. The combat exhibition was technically voluntary. Cadets could challenge each other to sparring matches in front of the instructors and the entire class. It was a chance to demonstrate skill. to earn recognition, to establish dominance. In practice, refusing a public challenge meant social death. The other cadets would mark you as a coward. Your career would be over before it started. Varax had been waiting for this. He made his challenge during morning assembly. In front of everyone, he stepped forward, pointed at Marcus, and spoke in a voice that carried through the entire hall. I challenge the human to combat exhibition. Let him prove he belongs here. The hall erupted in whispers and excited murmurs. This was what they had been waiting for. The Krethvol warrior against the weak human. It would be a slaughter. Marcus stood in his position among the cadets. Every eye turned to him. He could refuse. He could claim injury or illness. He could make excuses. He did none of these things. I accept, Marcus said, that the exhibition was scheduled for that evening. Word spread through the entire station. Cadets from other barracks requested permission to attend. Even instructors who had no reason to be there found excuses to watch. Training Hall 7 was packed when Marcus arrived. Hundreds of cadets lined the walls. Dozens of instructors occupied the observation platforms above. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Varax was already in the center of the hall, stretching his massive limbs. His scales had shifted to a deep red color, a sign of aggression in the species. He was ready to fight, ready to finally put the human in his place. Marcus walked through the crowd. Cadets moved aside to let him pass, not out of respect, but because they wanted a clear view. They wanted to see his face when he realized what he had agreed to. Marcus reached the center of the hall and faced Varax. The size difference was even more obvious now. Varax stood nearly 3 feet taller than the human. His arms were as thick as Marcus's legs. His natural armor could deflect most physical attacks. The senior instructor, a battle-scarred veteran named Commander Thrall, announced the rules. Submission or incapacitation. No weapons. No killing strikes. Medical teams stood ready. Begin, Commander Thrall said. Varax charged immediately. The Krethvol fought the way his people had fought for thousands of years. Overwhelming force. Direct assault. Crush the enemy before they could react. Marcus was not there when Varax arrived. The human had sidestepped at the last moment, moving just far enough to let the massive warrior pass by. Varax stumbled, surprised by the sudden lack of resistance. He turned and swung a heavy fist at Marcus's head. Marcus ducked. The fist passed through empty air. Varax attacked again. And again. And again. Each time, Marcus moved just enough to avoid the blow. He did not strike back. He did not counter. He simply was not where the attacks landed. The crowd grew confused. This was not how fights worked. The human should have been crushed in the first seconds. Instead, he was dancing around the Krethvol like water flowing around a stone. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Varax was breathing heavily now. His movements were slower. Anger clouded his judgment. He had never fought an opponent who would not engage. Marcus continued to observe. He watched how Varax moved. He noted which leg carried more weight. He tracked the patterns of attack. He was learning. Varax roared in frustration. He raised both arms above his head for a massive overhead strike. It was a killing blow among his people. The kind of attack that ended fights permanently. It was also predictable. Marcus moved forward instead of back. He slipped inside Varax's reach, too close for the overhead strike to land effectively. And then his hands moved. 3 strikes. Fast and precise. The first hit a nerve cluster under Varax's left arm. The second struck a point behind his knee. The third found a gap in the natural armor near his neck. Varax's arm went limp. His leg buckled. His body twisted as muscles stopped responding to his commands. Before the Crethful could recover, Marcus was behind him. He applied pressure to a joint that was already bending the wrong way. One push would break it completely. "Yield," Marcus said quietly. The hall was absolutely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Vorax struggled for a moment. He tried to break free, but every movement caused more pain. The human had him in a hold that should have been impossible. A hold that exploited weaknesses in Crethful anatomy that most species did not know existed. "Yield," Marcus repeated. Vorax yielded. Marcus released him immediately and stepped back. He offered no celebration, no taunting. He simply stood there, waiting for the medical team to check on his opponent. The silence continued for a long moment. Then the whispers began. How had the human known those nerve points? How had he moved so fast? What kind of training did humans receive? Marcus walked off the floor without looking at the crowd. He passed Mira near the edge of the hall. She saw his face clearly as he went by. He did not look triumphant. He looked tired. And something else. Something that looked almost like sadness. The human had won. But watching him leave, Myra understood that victory had cost him something she could not name. The days following the exhibition were strange. The open hostility toward Marcus had stopped. No more shoulder checks in corridors. No more stolen equipment. No more targeting in simulations, but it had been replaced by something else. Distance, wariness, fear. The cadets watched Marcus now the way prey animals watch a predator. They had mistaken for one of their own. They gave him space. They lowered their voices when he passed. They avoided his eyes. Marcus noticed this. He did not like it. Rumors spread through the station. Some said the human was genetically modified. Others claimed he was a secret weapon developed by Earth's military. A few whispered that humans were not the peaceful species they pretended to be. After the first evaluation period, Academy protocol allowed cadets to request access to personnel files. Vorax made the request. He needed to understand what had defeated him. The file circulated through Barracks 17 within hours. Marcus Cole, age 34. Born in a city called Detroit on Earth. Enlisted in military service at age 19. Served 12 years in the United Earth Conflict Resolution Course. The file listed his deployments. 9 different worlds. Names that meant nothing to most cadets but everything to those who recognized them. Kepler Station. The Thresh Uprising. The Mars Corridor Incident. Places where humans had fought and died. The file listed his decorations. Combat Service Medals. A Commendation for Valor. A Purple Heart. Whatever that meant. The file listed his discharge status. Honorable. Medical. The details were classified. Myra read the file 3 times. She understood now why Marcus moved the way he did. Why he observed everything. Why he slept lightly and ate quickly. Why he seemed so tired all the time. The human was not a new cadet learning to be a warrior. He was a veteran trying to learn how to be something else. That evening, Vorax approached Marcus in the barracks. The room went quiet. Cadets expected violence. After the humiliation of the exhibition, the Crethful had every reason to seek revenge. But Vorax did not attack. He stopped in front of Marcus and stood there for a moment, his scales shifting through uncertain colors. "Why did you not break my arm?" Vorax asked. "You had the angle. You had the leverage." Any further pressure, and the joint would have shattered. Marcus looked up from his book. He considered the question seriously before answering. "Because you are not my enemy," he said. "You are my classmate. We are supposed to learn together, not destroy each other." Vorax processed this. Among his people, mercy in combat was seen as weakness. But this did not feel like weakness. It felt like something else. something his culture had no word for. "I read your file," Varax said. "You have killed before." Marcus did not deny it. "Yes, many times." "Yes." Varax sat down on the bunk across from Marcus. It was the first time they had been at the same level. The first time they had spoken as equals. "Why did you come here?" Varax asked. "You have already proven yourself in real combat. This academy teaches nothing you do not know." Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was softer than Varax had ever heard it. "I came here because I am tired of war," Marcus said. "I am tired of killing. I thought maybe if I learned how other species do things, I might find a better way. A way that does not end with so much death." Varax did not fully understand this. His people glorified combat. Warriors who died in battle were honored for generations. But he recognized the weight in the human's words. The exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. "You are stronger than you pretend to be," Varax said. "Strength is not always about fighting," Marcus replied. "Sometimes it is about knowing when not to fight." Varax considered this. Then he raised his right arm and pressed his palm flat against his chest. It was the crethful gesture of acknowledged respect, given to worthy opponents, given to equals. It was the first time in Academy history that a crethful had given this gesture to a human. Marcus recognized the significance. He stood and bowed his head slightly in the human way. An acknowledgement returned. Around the room, the other cadets watched in silence. Something had shifted. The barracks that had been divided was becoming something else. Not unified yet, but the walls were coming down. Crix, the Stethony who had taken Marcus's seat in the mess hall, watched from his bunk. He did not approach. He was not ready, but he was thinking. Myra smiled to herself. She had known there was more to the human than others could see. Now they were beginning to understand. That night, for the first time, Marcus did not sleep alone in this corner. Varax moved his things to the bunk next to him. A statement. A declaration. A human had an ally now. 3 weeks after the exhibition, Barrack 17 had transformed. It was subtle at first. Cadets who had ignored each other began working together in simulations. Species that had traditional rivalries found common ground. The barracks started winning group exercises against other units. Marcus was at the center of this change without trying to be. He did not give orders or demand loyalty. He simply treated everyone with the same calm respect, regardless of species or status. And somehow, that respect spread. Varax became his unofficial translator for crethful customs. Myra helped him understand the political dynamics of the academy. Even Crix, after several awkward attempts, began acknowledging Marcus with small nods in the corridors. Not everyone was happy about this development. Senior cadets from other barracks watched Barrack 17's rise with concern. The traditional hierarchy was being disrupted. A human was gaining influence. This could not be allowed to continue. The leader of this opposition was a Therixian named Soleth. His family had connections throughout the coalition government. His grandfather had been an admiral. His future was guaranteed, regardless of his academy performance. But his pride demanded recognition. Soleth decided to remind Barrack 17 of the natural order. He arrived during evening rest period with 6 allies. Large cadets from powerful families. A show of force that would intimidate most barracks into submission. The door opened and they walked in like they owned the place. Conversation stopped. Cadets looked up from their activities. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Everyone recognized a challenge when they saw one. Soleth walked directly toward Marcus, who was sitting on his bunk reading his paper book. The Therixian stopped in front of him, flanked by his entourage. "Human," Soleth said. The word was an insult in his tone. You have caused quite a disturbance." Marcus looked up from his book. He did not stand. He did not react with fear or aggression. He simply looked at the Therixian and waited. Solith was thrown off by this lack of response. He had expected either submission or defiance, not this calm attention. He pressed forward. "You seem to have forgotten your place," Solith continued. "Humans are new to the galaxy. You have no history, no legacy, no right to the influence you are accumulating." Marcus closed his book and set it aside. He gave Solith his full attention. Solith took this as encouragement. He launched into a prepared speech about the natural hierarchy of species, about how some races were born to lead and others to follow, about how humans should be grateful for even being allowed at Vortex. He spoke for several minutes. His allies nodded along. His voice grew more confident as he laid out his philosophy of galactic superiority. When he finished, he waited for Marcus to respond, to apologize, to agree, to argue, something. Marcus looked at him. Just looked. There was no threat in the human's eyes, no challenge, no anger. There was only a calm, steady gaze that seemed to see straight through Solith to something behind him. It was the look of someone who had faced real danger, who had seen friends die, who had killed and nearly been killed, who had survived things that Solith could not imagine. It was the look of someone who was not impressed. The silence stretched. 1 second, 5 seconds, 10. Solith's confidence began to crack. His prepared speeches had no power against this silence. His allies shifted uncomfortably. The display of force suddenly seemed foolish. Then Verax stood up from his bunk and walked over to stand beside Marcus. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence said everything. Crix rose next. Then Myra. Then others. One by one, the cadets of Barrack 17 stood and gathered around the human. Not in front of him, protecting him. Beside him, joining him. A wall of different species, different shapes and sizes and abilities, united by something that Solith could not understand. Solith looked at the gathering opposition. His mouth opened and closed. The words he had prepared seemed meaningless now. "I think," Solith said finally, his voice much weaker than before, "that this is not worth my time." He turned and walked out. His allies followed quickly, grateful for the excuse to leave. The door closed behind them. The tension broke. Cadets laughed and returned to their bunks. Some clapped Verax on the shoulder. Others simply smiled and shook their heads at the absurdity of what had just happened. Marcus picked up his book and found his page. Around him, conversations resumed. But they were different now, warmer, easier. Myra sat down on the bunk next to him. "You did not say a single word," she observed. Marcus shrugged slightly. "Words were not necessary. What was that look you gave him?" "I thought he might faint." Marcus considered the question. "I have seen men like him before. They believe in their own importance. They have never been tested. When they meet someone who does not care about their status or their speeches, they do not know what to do." Myra thought about this. "You showed him that you were not afraid of him." "I showed him that I have been afraid of much worse things," Marcus said. "And I'm still here." Verax joined them, sitting on the floor because no bunk could hold his weight comfortably. "The human speaks truth. Fear is only useful when it keeps you alive. Solith's kind fears losing face, losing status. These are small fears, not worth respect." Crix appeared at the edge of their group. He hesitated for a moment, then sat down with them. "I owe you an apology," he said to Marcus. "For before." "The mess hall." Marcus nodded. "Accepted." That was all. No lecture, no demands. Just acceptance and moving forward. The barracks settled into evening routine. But something had changed permanently. They were no longer just cadets assigned to the same quarters. They were a unit, a team. They were the beginning of something new. Outside the window, stars drifted past as the station continued its endless orbit. Somewhere out there, conflicts were brewing. Wars were being planned. The galaxy remained dangerous and unpredictable. But in Barracks 17, on this night, there was peace. And at the center of that peace sat a quiet human reading his paper book, surrounded by aliens who had learned that strength came in many forms. The loudest voice did not always win. The biggest warrior was not always the strongest. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the room was simply the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly who he was. Marcus Cole turned another page and kept reading. Around him, his new family prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them together,